Good afternoon, everybody. How about we turn that down just a little bit, Sam? Thank you. I moved. You got to keep your eyes on me. I want to welcome everyone to our GPAC meeting 2.5. It's technically the second half of our second GPAC meeting. That is the General Plan Advisory Committee. And we are finishing up the overall agenda that was first covered in our June 28th meeting. Just want to take a moment to let everybody know that Ruby is taking our minutes today. Yay! Thank you, Ruby. She'll also take roll in just a moment. Hey, Danny. And if I could just introduce our newest planner, Pablo Guerrero, is all the way back there in the back. So we invited him to join us so he could watch some of the totally fun planning stuff that we're doing. Okay. Ruby, would you go ahead?
Paul Duncan, not present. Philip Hartley. Here. Benjamin Murphy.
Here.
Thank you. Betsy Kahn. Present on Zoom. Sharon Zoller.
Here.
Thank you. Kyle Bill.
Here.
Thank you. Marty Arberg. Not present. Donna Makowitz.
Present on Zoom.
Thank you. Seifert Weston.
Here.
Thank you. Carolyn Hillman.
Present on Zoom.
Thank you. Daniel Tyrell.
On Zoom.
Thank you. Denise Rushing.
I'm present on Zoom.
Thank you. April Leiferman.
Here.
Thank you. Fawn Williams. And Margot Combara.
Here.
Thank you.
Justin, I just realized that we have your name backwards on our roster. We'll get that fixed.
That's what happens when you have two last names.
Okay. We also have a few members of our PlaceWorks team attending via Zoom. And just to take a look at the overall agenda we're working on today, Tanya, I'm not sure if PlaceWorks has any updates since the June 28th meeting.
Hi, Mireya. This is Andrea. Tammy Seal and I will be representing PlaceWorks today. We do not have any updates to the agenda. We plan to continue as scheduled in the previous call with the plan discussion questions.
Wonderful. So I will go ahead and just let everyone know that the applications for our local area plan advisory committees, our LAPACs, will go before the board for their consideration this upcoming Tuesday, the 16th. We are really appreciative of the robust response that we've received, but some of them still do not have 9 members or applications to fill all 9 spots. So if you can think of anyone who might be interested in serving on the LAPACs, please encourage them to continue to send in applications. So long as we get them, probably before the meeting starts on Tuesday, so preferably Monday night, we'll make sure that we get them distributed for consideration to the board.
Can you let us know just the ones that are lacking numbers?
Oh yeah, don't forget your microphone. I think that we did have, let's see, picturing it in my head, Riviera's area plan could use a few more people. Kelseyville looks good. Cobb Mountain's very good. Middletown's good. Lower Lake's good. Possibly Upper Lake Nice might need any more. But it doesn't hurt to give the supervisor a healthy selection to choose from. So if anybody is interested or expresses interest, we did have one supervisor note that we don't have a lot of our younger population, of those with kids or even our youth. So if you have anyone who is interested, I know it's hard, but well, actually, it's hard after school starts. But if you have people who might be interested, we're anticipating a minimum of 2 LAPAC meetings per planning area, with more to be planned if necessary. But the goal of the LAPAC, or the whole purpose of a LAPAC, is to achieve consensus in a number of areas of particular interest within a local area plan. That would include community growth boundaries, or the boundaries of the actual whole planning area itself, or any design guidelines that might need updating, things like that. Or areas where there may not be consensus yet in a local area plan. We want to make sure that we really drill down and give time for the input that's needed so that moving forward we feel like we've got the community vision captured. So we will only meet as many times as we need to. Like example for Rivieras, there was so much consensus and unity in what they felt the key issues were that one may not need as many, so as possibly other areas. So thank you. Your support would be greatly appreciated. The next item was the countywide elements policy issues reviewed. So at our last meeting, we did also cover the general plan overview document, and you have before you a handout of just the notes that we took, or I took of this meeting, covering different comments from people. And in that first page, the general plan overview, the items that were noted for consensus for inclusion are in bold. However, I'm thinking I might have missed a few that the GPAC might want included. It looks like this. It's a separate handout, Sharon. It's got the little eco staple on the side. Did you not get it? I have extras. Ruby, can you get her that?
I have one up here. I got tons.
Thank you.
Maria, before you move on to this subject, I just had one comment and one question about the local area plans, the previous agenda item. You asked about the youth. You mentioned the fact that the youth are not involved. Every high school has a government class. Their senior class takes a government class. You might want to contact the teachers of those classes and ask them if they wanted to offer that opportunity to the government class students, the seniors in the high schools.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, there's some great government class students. And the other thing is, I didn't hear you mention anything about the new Big Valley Community Action Group that was formed after this General Plan Advisory Committee was formed.
Yeah, the Big Valley Community Advisory Committee is a municipal advisory committee, so it's not a LAPAC. The LAPAC for that is the Kelseyville Area Plan LAPAC.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, we do have a spot for a representative of the Big Valley Advisory Committee on the Kelseyville LAPAC.
Thanks, that's helpful.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's a good question because that Municipal Advisory Council just happened to get formed at the same time that we were working on the general plan, so there's been some communication, some confusion regarding, who's doing what. So I do appreciate that question. If we could go over, you know what, Ruby? We're going to need to email this out to anybody who requests it as well. So I don't know if you have it. It is, one moment. I want to make sure that everybody who's attending via Zoom has the access to this document that the GPAC is looking at. You can find it under the general plan, the one on the eDrive under planning projects. If you are attending via Zoom and would like to have Ruby email this sheet to you, please put your email address in the chat, and she's going to work on that. We disabled the chat. Please send an email to Ruby. .mitts, so that's ruby.mitts at lakecountyca.gov. That's Ruby Mitts, 2 T's, at lakecountyca.gov, and she'll be happy to get that out to you. A couple of the areas that I was wondering if the GPAC intended to have had consensus to include or consider in the general plan overview. If we could start with Denise Rushing's. We did capture the Mount Konocti as a dominant geographic feature later on, so that's included. Also regarding a statement of values in the beginning, we highlighted. We did get the mentioning the volcanic region with the geothermal resources, which I think Phil also mentioned, as well as the surrounding mountains and Mount Konocti being one of the most prominent geographical features. As well, we captured the adding in the tribal history that were included in Dr. Parker's suggestions that were specific to Lake County, not the one about Sonoma County. There's a grammar error that I just didn't think we needed to capture. We'll get that fixed. And adding flooding to the hazards. That one I did not highlight. As well as in the general plan health and safety, adding invasive species, tree mortality, health outbreaks, and cyanobacteria blooms. And in agriculture resources, I did not. Denise suggested adding a clause of while still protecting and serving our environment under management of agricultural resources, which was not captured in our consensus. But what was captured was calling out the goods and services in commercial and industry. So my question for the GPAC going forward was if we wanted to include the hazards, the extra hazards that were listed, that would be flooding under hazards, and then invasive species, tree mortality, health outbreaks, and cyanobacteria blooms within the health and safety. Good. Thumbs up in the room. For our GPAC members attending via Zoom, can you just give me a thumbs up or a hands up if you approve adding these hazards to the listing? Yep.
On the hazards on, dealing with algae.
Oh, could you get the microphone, please, Phil?
A footnote, really, we're going to include algae and bacteria, as potential hazards. I think we need to approach that in the document very accurately, because every year the whole county lights up with discussions about all the cyanobacteria that's going to kill our dogs and everything else. And we still can't find the one dog who died sometime in the history of the county, but that dog lives on. And anyway, it's a complex subject, and part of what happens in the lake every summer is not a hazard. It is a natural process, just like planting tomato plants, and they grow and they come up, Oh, there's a terrible hazard in my backyard. There's these plants all coming up out of the ground, A lot of what happens in the lake is just that. It's either a form of vegetation or one of 130 species of algae that have been growing there probably for 1 million years. And they're going to continue to grow there unless the lake dies. There is, you narrow it down, you narrow it down, you narrow it down to a particular small group of what's sometimes referred to as cyanobacteria. Not all cyanobacteria, but there are some subspecies there that can, during the summer, produce a toxin as a byproduct of, what they're doing in the lake. And, it doesn't send everybody off on a wild goose chase, trying to come up with solutions to make the lake not turn green every summer. And
If the members would prefer, we can reword cyanobacteria to hazardous algae blooms. This term would actually match some of the studies that are going on right now regarding health impacts.
Hazardous bacteria.
No, cyanobacteria is not algae.
Ooh,
Right.
thank you.
That's right.
Hazardous algae
Absolutely
and
not.
cyanobacteria
Algae is not the
blooms.
problem.
Yeah.
It's
Thank you.
cyanobacteria.
Okay, so then hazardous cyanobacteria blooms, or
Yeah, you could even use the word
Subspecies,
specific hazardous cyanobacteria. I mean, there's the hazards, right?
Right.
As it turns out, there are a very small number of algae that produce a toxin that is bioaccumulated, and I did not know about that until just recently. If you consult with Angela Dow and with the Public Health Department, they have included algae toxins as a potential hazard, but it's a very small, it's much less than the cyanobacteria toxins, but it does exist. I agree with Phil. We have to provide good information about the reality of natural lake populations, but we also need to be extremely accurate about these two hazardous populations of algae and cyanobacteria.
And I know nobody likes reading scientific nomenclature and whatnot, but I think you name them. You name them. Instead of saying, cyanobacteria. No. Name the subspecies. There's a scientific name for the ones that produce the toxins. And then if these two algae out of the 130 also produce a toxin, well, then name them in our official document, you see. Because that's where people are going to refer to as they try to understand the issue.
how about this?
And then send that report to NASA.
So how about this then? Blooms of hazardous algae and cyanobacteria. Is that better?
I'd say you have to use at least the words certain specific as modifiers to those two.
Hazardous specific. Hazardous hyphen specific. So then it would be blooms of hazardous hyphen specific algae and cyanobacteria.
Blooms of
Where can we get the
Specific.
information in terms of the specific?
Yeah, do a footnote with the listed of species. How about that?
there you go.
Seriously? In the general plan overview, this is like the very first part. We're not going to
No.
do a comprehensive definition of all types of algae.
No,
I don't think that would fit very well.
but it's
But you
important.
could do a footnote that would lead people to what they are, right?
Or how to find more information on what they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to do the same with invasive species?
Right.
Well, invasive species has a definition in science, and it's a common one. It's not like some people call this an invasive species and others think this is an invasive. No, there's a general common view of what constitutes an invasive species in the larger community. But to say that algae produces toxins, no, that's not an accurate statement because the class is too big.
So
Well,
maybe
I
we go
don't
back to cyanobacteria blooms as currently stated. Since we know that the cyanobacteria is, and just don't worry about the algae right now.
But not all cyanobacteria is toxic.
Right, that's
I
correct.
think what Phil's trying to do is say that we need to point people to specific information. I think in the general overview, if you used a hyperlink, when you use those terms, algae and cyanobacteria, and the hyperlink took you to those specific definitions later on in the document, that might be helpful. But you're trying to avoid the confusion, Phil. I understand that.
Right, and we don't want to give the impression that all the algae that we have naturally in our lake is harmful.
That's right.
Correct.
Right.
So my wonderment about invasive species is that plant and animal.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the general public knows what an invasive species is. What does that mean? What are they? Why are they a hazard? I mean, trees of heaven look lovely, but they're horrible.
Well, a couple sentences could come in there to say, you could do a one-sentence definition of invasive species right out of, I don't know, most biology textbooks or not. And then another sentence or two are why they're a problem. They're a problem because they compete with, local fauna and flora and cause you, and they reduce biodiversity, therefore. And, a couple sentences can define the issue. By the way, do you know that cats are an invasive species?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
A lot of our squirrels are
let me
too.
just get clarification, because I can see the health and safety under key issues, and I'm wondering if I actually put this in the wrong section, Denise. I know that this was
Yeah, I think maybe.
Yeah, I think goes in the key issues rather than the overview statement.
Yeah, and also I need to point out that this is an overview, and it's also not, even though we need to be mindful of PR, it's not a PR document. 99.9% of the citizens probably won't read it, and the press probably won't either, but what it is for those who are trying to develop or trying to figure out policies for the county's planning. So, it doesn't have to be all-inclusive, I realize that, but it does have to guide, the planning for the things that we think are going to happen. So we know, for example, these hazards take place, and we just need planning for that.
I do think, too, I think there was conversation at the last meeting about having a glossary or a definition of terms. So, I mean, you could drop that invasive species in that definition of terms.
Exactly.
So let's take a look. One of the things that one of the reasons why we're going through key issues today is because we want to identify if there's anything missing that's going to then be reflected in the second survey for our second round of community workshops. When we take a look at invasive species, tree mortality, health outbreaks, and hazardous, all that stuff, blooms and cyanobacteria, I'm trying to picture sort of where it would fit on our list of key issues, because under health and safety, it's sort of what we want to talk to people about is emergency preparedness, response, and recovery, not necessarily the exact threats, because those would be listed elsewhere, like in our climate adaptation plan or our local hazard mitigation plan or our safety element. And so I'm not sure that an inclusion of a comprehensive list of all the threats that we need to prepare and respond to is actually going to be included in the second survey anyway, if that makes sense. Okay, so I think that this is good stuff because we need to make sure it is included. It's just not included here. But we will need your attention and your awareness to make sure that we don't forget it in the locations where we really need to have it included. Denise, does that make sense? Okay, we're going to go on. Oh, go ahead, Andrea.
Hi. I wanted to just clarify that this list of key issues that was shared with the GPAC members today, it is intended to be inclusive only of those that are countywide issues. Not all of these will be covered in the upcoming survey. The survey will look at a selection of key issues that are LAP specific and countywide, due primarily to the nature of wanting to keep the survey from being too long. There are many issues that have been identified by the community. So if there are any that you see that are missing under any of these categories, that is great feedback that we would love to receive today. It does not have to be exclusively what you were thinking should or should not be included in something that would be surveyed to the community. We are eager for your feedback on all things. And Mireya, if it's helpful, I do have the slides on hand when you're ready to dive back into the key issues in more detail in the policy options question.
Super. Thank you very much, Andrea, and I appreciate that. I think that I was probably getting a little zoomed in on the local area plans. So that was a really good reminder that the GPAC is really focusing on a lot of the countywide issues. Thank you. Yeah, Margot.
Thank you. I would like to ask for GPAC's clarification on, excuse me, a topic or an issue that was raised at the last meeting, and that was by Ms. Rushing about ag resources. I don't think it's mutually exclusive to promote ag resources while still protecting and serving our environment. I was wondering, what is the opinion of GPAC? Are you comfortable with saying that, well, yeah, we can support that?
I think it could have just been inadvertently left from my recap on consensus. I don't remember any discussion actually opposing it. I think it just dropped. I picked it up again today when I was watching the video. So that's why, yeah, I was going to thank you for presenting that. Let's go to, awesome, thanks. Let's go to Denise in Zoom. She has her hand up.
Hey there, I was having trouble unmuting. I just wanted to, that's why I raised my hand. So I guess that trouble has been solved. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. We do have a hand up as a guest. Please introduce yourself, guest, and go ahead.
Guest.
Just.
Guest, we're unable to hear you. It looks like your microphone is not working.
So let's go back then to the in ag resources, adding the clause while still protecting and serving our environment. I think I saw a number of nods on this one already under ag resources of protecting and serving our environment.
What is the definition of that? I mean, I think all farmers do, but I don't know, what does that mean? Say what your thoughts were.
It was Denise's comment, if she would like to expand on that. Denise, could you go back to the part where you said, where you wanted to add that clause of in agricultural resources on while still protecting and serving our environment?
Thanks. I think I need to be added to the panels list or something. I'm having trouble unmuting here. Okay, so it's not obvious. It's not obviously. Most farmers take care of the environment. They have to in order to take care of the land. That's a given, and that's recognized. It's not always true, however, and there are many applications that might come to the Planning Commission or to the Board of Supervisors, and I've seen them, where the environment isn't the primary, isn't even considered actually in some of those applications. And so this is sort of dealing with the bad apple who might be wanting to literally pollute streams and cut down trees and that sort of thing. Now, granted, we have a lot of laws and policies around those things, and that's why that phrase is in there, right? So it's not necessarily a given that, and there's, for example, a lot of unregulated agriculture in this county that I really personally wish were regulated. And the history of that unregulated agriculture has been very destructive to the environment. When it is finally regulated, and as it is regulated, the statement that while preserving and protecting the environment, I feel needs to be in there, and it needs to be strongly considered, because not everyone is a good actor.
And it's also an educational issue. I mean, entrepreneurial farmer or grower or whatnot simply may not be aware that the practice that he or she is proposing to use in his fields has been found to be deleterious, to the environment, and there are better, ways of accomplishing.
Yeah, there are best practices and
I mean, our country has long history, starting with the Dust Bowl, of poor poor
Well,
practice.
and our county does too. I mean, we have a history of, in the past, we've used DDT. It was written up in Silent Spring. And of course, we fixed that. And agriculture was a huge part of getting that corrected. And that was because we wanted to preserve and protect the environment. So anyway, that's what it means, preserving and protecting the environment.
Still looking for consensus of the GPAC regarding the addition of that one.
What are you asking for a vote? What?
Yes, unless there's any further discussion.
How do we vote?
Hands up in the Zoom if you support the addition of that clause. Excellent. Looks pretty unanimous. Okay, great. Thank you. Highlighted, bold. Add that one. Super duper. Okay. I think the next one in Ag Resources is great. We got the add local from Sharon. Phil's was the lake and geographical features. Margot supported the addition of the value statements as a guide. Anything else?
I'd like to ask about the value statements.
Excellent.
Is that something that we should have like a committee, like a separate committee to develop value statements? Is that something that we discuss during these meetings? I thought that was a fantastic conversation from the last meeting, and I think it's a great, provides a great lens to be able to, make decisions and move policy in terms of these are our governing values. So I think it's important. I was really happy that that was brought up, and then essentially how do we do that?
Good. Denise, that came from one of your older emails from May 8th. Would you like to go ahead and address that?
Well, I don't know that I can address the how, but I could come up with a suggestion for the how, and it might be worthwhile. You've heard a lot from the GPAC members already. It might be worthwhile for staff to create a draft. We have drafts in the past, both in the county budget and in, I don't know that we did it in the general plan, but certainly in the county budget, we've had drafts of what's important here. And so I do think the GPAC should react to that and have a say in what that value statement is. I have my own personal opinion of what it should be, but I think everybody else will need to weigh in as well.
Okay, so the general plan overview is a fairly brief document, but staff, we can go ahead and draft an additional section on statement and values, and then when we bring that back to the GPAC for review at a later date, that's when y'all can add to it or amend it if necessary.
Would it be
I would suggest
worthwhile
that you glean from what has already been submitted, right? Because most of us have started at this broad value-based level,
right?
And I think you see a lot of it there. And in fact, you've had the community meetings as well, so you can glean from that what the community values.
Would it be worthwhile, like the next round of surveys to go out to just pose that, like, as a community member of Lake County, like, what are 5 things that you hold? I mean, just as to get information, or maybe it's 15 words kind of thing, and they circle 5, and to at least be able to get what the community views or values. Potentially.
That's possible. However, I actually could name a few just based on going to all the first community workshops, because what clearly resonated throughout all of our communities was an appreciation for the natural beauty, the small town feel that we have, the support of the local businesses in our community. What else? Oh, there were a few themes that just real clearly came to the top. And so that's where I think we're going to focus on as a first draft for that.
Cultural, social, neighborhood.
Yeah, how we're a huge county, but we feel like a small town. And
Please
people really want to preserve that small community feeling and the rural community nature of it, of our county as well.
And you probably, just from a response point of view, if you want to get a broader end view, you'd probably get a broader end view by putting out a draft and saying, does this represent what you feel are the core values for Lake County? People, and they can. Yeah.
Please excuse me for interrupting, but speakers at the table can speak freely without asking to be acknowledged. I just wanted to mention, I thought at some point what Margot was referring to was the Vision 2028 aspirations that created the values of the Board of Supervisors. I thought that was in some of the suggestions, and I'm not sure if that's related or not. I just want to remind you of that.
I missed that part. I'm sorry.
Actually, Betsy, you're right. I drew inspiration from Vision 2028 because those were values that were adopted by the Board of Supervisors. I also drew from other official documents where Lake County values were identified, and especially with some of our goals that we want for the county, such as tourism, economic development, and a lot of it has to do with conservation and preserving the natural beauty of our county.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Betsy, for jumping in there. And Margot, Lake County 2028, which is the vision that's been compiled and approved by the public and our Board of Supervisors, is a really good thing, too. We're going to add that as well. Thank you. Okay. I want to check in with PlaceWorks staff and see if there's anything you needed with, or anything you wanted to point out that might be on the slideshow. Or if we should move on to further down the page, which I think Ruby should have just sent you. She's working on it right now.
Mireya, this is Andrea. Can you just confirm what item you're on? I'm not sure if you're working off of the original agenda or if you're referring to something else.
Yeah, we're going off of, actually, this was before we could get, this says countywide elements, but I think it means countywide key issues, right? Oh, policy issues, yeah. So just before that, we just needed consensus on a couple things that I think I missed on the general plan overview portion. So, but I think we're just about done.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I believe we did. It seemed like we were wrapping up the discussion of the key issues and question 1 regarding those, feedback on the issues themselves, if any were missing, and we're about ready to move on. If not ready to move on to the second question is, would you like to see these issues addressed, or how would you like to see these issues addressed by the general plan? And Tammy and I are standing by if there are any questions regarding the technical nature of any of those things.
Super. So on page 2 of my notes handout, we do start covering key issues. Give you a moment to review that. Just a moment. Thank you, Ruby.
Mireya, I see one typo.
Just one?
Well, there's probably more, but the one that is under my section, it says climate has a responsibility to maintain its own properties. I think that I meant to say, if I did not say it, the county has responsibility to maintain its own
Oh,
properties.
that is totally my error. Thank you. I wasn't cutting or copying and pasting. I was retyping. So you're right. Thank you. For Placework staff, your input on how these comments could be reflected to answer question 2 would probably be helpful for the committee in just a minute, as soon as they're done reviewing. Also, for our GPAC members who are in Zoom, you should all be panelists now. So as Betsy pointed out, I'm not looking at the room and the Zoom at the same time. So if you need to jump in, feel free to do so. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Ray, I will tell you, I have not yet received anything from Ruby, so I'm not sure what we're looking at.
I just got it. So working.
And okay, I'll look for it in my email. Also, I think the Andrea suggested that we move to item 2 on the agenda, which does that mean that all of those other lists of issues that we contributed at the previous meeting that are in the agenda package, are we done with those? We're not going to talk about those?
The key issues that we listed, and since we didn't actually get a chance to vote on a consensus on the key issues, I didn't have a lot to highlight or to identify. But they should be listed on pages 2 and 3. And so we can go through those also. We won't lose those.
Thank you.
Some of them I think we'll find as we go through the process may be more of a question 2. How do we want to see this reflected in the general plan rather than a key issue specifically itself? And Betsy, your 8-page email is actually included in the agenda packet. So I didn't list everything out in my 3-pager synopsis because we'd have access to that directly in the agenda packet as well.
But that's fine, but I haven't heard any comments from any of the other GPAC members about those issues that I was trying to raise, which I did not get to discuss at the last meeting. And some of the key ones for me, the specific one that some of the local area plan members, applicants have asked me about law enforcement, for example. How are we going to address that in the general plan? Your second question is how will we address that? So that's a good example of a key issue. Yes, they're in my 8-page email. Yes, they're in your synopsis. But what does the GPAC think about this?
Good. So before we get started with our discussion then, perhaps Placeworks would like to take a moment and talk to us about the technical ways that the suggestions of the public and the GPAC are reflected then in our in the document. Or going forward. I think it'll help as a model for us to be able to answer question number 2.
Okay, that I was going to ask. So you, Mireya, are asking about for question number 2, how would you like to see the issues addressed by the general plan? How we are taking this feedback and incorporating that into the plan and or outreach? Is that your question?
Yes, that way it'll help us to sort of frame it in a context that helps us to move forward.
Okay, wonderful. So once we've identified all key issues or areas of concern that community members would like to see addressed in the general plan, we are looking for your input on your ideas for how those key issues are addressed. In the upcoming round of engagement, we will have a survey that involves questions related directly to these items for a selection of key issues, both those that are going to be addressed in the LAP elements and those that are covered by county-wide elements, so not just those that are listed on the key issues list in front of GPAC members today. If there are comments with ideas for additional potential solutions or other ways that you'd like to see issues addressed in the general plan that make sense to survey community members on that are covered in, that are regarding issues that are covered in the survey, then that is one place that you would see those comments reflected right away, and give us an opportunity to get additional input from your fellow community members. If those are not key issues that are covered in the community survey, then they will still be considered as we are crafting the policies and actions to implement the general plan. But ultimately, I guess the succinct way of answering this is ultimately all things are meant to inform the goals, policies, and actions that end up in your general plan to see your aims for the county implemented.
Thank you. In Betsy's email that we received last time, and that is also included in the agenda, it does offer a number of new bullet items, which would be new key issues that we had missed. But also, and Betsy, correct me if I'm wrong, but a number of a significant amount of the text underneath your new bullet issues or your subject matters actually address how you'd like to see it or how it should be covered in the general plan. So Betsy, why don't we start with your email, and we'll go through the line items to see what we need to either include as a missing item, as well as address how it should be, how we'd like to see it addressed in the general plan.
Well, I'm just looking at the summary that Ruby sent out.
Yeah, that I wrote.
I'm sorry?
It was a quick note summarization that I wrote. Yeah, that Ruby
that's
just
good.
sent out.
And there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 bullet items, and I think they cover the majority of all that text. And as you say, a lot of my prose was intended to offer ways to address that particular issue in the general plan. So that's what filled up a lot of that text in the 8-page email. So
good. Betsy?
Yeah.
I just realized that Ruby sent out a version that was not the one that I copied, so we're going to go get that one because the bullet points are really helpful, and I'm going to make sure that the GPAC sees that. So all the people in the Zoom this time got that one first, so let's get the GPAC members in the room. I think it'll help speed the conversation. We'll just take a break for a moment.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I'd love to blame you, but I'm pretty sure it was me. Oh, good. Well, that was awesome, because that was the one that I knew.
Maria, while we're waiting, may I ask a question, just point of clarification for me probably. So the general plan, once we get it in place, and I see some of these really good points that Betsy's put out in her email, a lot of them are finance-driven, money-driven to address them. Will that be something that is considered by the Board of Supervisors when they're making a budget? Or, I'm just looking at law enforcement, you know, more money for the Sheriff's Department would address a lot of these things that she lists, which are things that need to be done.
Can you see if you can email it to Wendy and then go print it out in admin? It'll be faster than running upstairs. Thank you. Yes.
Anyway, the things that need to be done, where is the funding, or how can these things be funded? And so I thought, okay, so who has the money? Board of Supervisors has the money. So will this be then a recommended blueprint for them to consider when they're making a budget? I wonder, where does this go? And again, these are really good suggestions, but so many of them are fund-driven in order to address.
Yeah, the answer is yes and more. One of the One of the ways that the general plan or local area plans are tools is that it lists the priorities of the community. That is then a voice to the Board of Supervisors as well, how they could be allocating funding that is available to them. But it also serves as support for grant applications for both state and federal. And so particularly, well, the state and the feds want to see that the projects that we are proposing grant funds for are consistent with the community vision. And so sometimes it's hard to know where those funds are eventually going to come from, but it opens it up to all the maximum amount of opportunities if it's reflected in our vision and planning documents.
Isn't there an economic development conversation as well? So law enforcement, a good chunk of it is supported by the TID, which is lodging, which is tourism, and that we have that tourism piece, it's kind of cyclical. So how do we drive more lodging and more tourism to be able to drive more dollars for funding for law enforcement?
Good point. Yep. And frequently we do cobble together multiple sources of funding in order to get the job done too.
Mireya?
Yes, Denise.
I just want to point out, as a former member of the Board of Supervisors, there's never enough money to do everything you want to do. So the general plan is not the funding document, the county budget is. And the county budget does have a statement of values and why the budget was allocated the way it was allocated. And the general plan is a guiding policy document, which is what, the wishes of the community. And all those sources of funding have to have a plan as their backing. Otherwise, you don't get those grants and those, state sources of money. But I also want to point out that the funding itself, it happens, like I said, through the budget process, and that budget process is also a set of hearings that the public attends and that we all have the opportunity to weigh in on.
Thank you.
The other thing I need to say is that when the law enforcement and those things come up, they come up often in the context of development. So one of the things that happens with one of the roles the general plan plays in that is that if, for example, a number of developments are being proposed, those developments have to come with the funding to expand law enforcement so that it doesn't lean on what the community already has. I don't know if that makes sense, but if the community doesn't have enough law enforcement now and you put more people into the mix, those new homes and those new developments need to come with the funding to help expand the law enforcement and other public services so that the existing services aren't degraded as a result of that development.
Yes, April.
I just would like to add, I think it's also very important how Denise pointed out that there's never enough funding to cover everything. And I think as we represent our communities, it's also important to understand when you have multiple sources and partnerships with funding, even if someone believes or a group believes or a LPAC believes that their number one issue was, let's say, roads, but something else got funded. Oftentimes, there are government initiatives or there are grants that specify a certain type of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's important for us to say, for us to let the public know, it's not going to be like this was our number one priority, but this grant came in to fund this other thing, so that they don't think it's an automatic, check 1, check 2, check 3. And to understand it, and that's how it works with multiple sources.
Mm-hmm. Right, I'm sure Denise would also echo that there's never enough money, and so little of the overall county budget is even discretionary. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is already pre-allocated. Yay, thank you, Ruby. May I have
Add
a
a
copy,
comment, please?
Absolutely, jump in. Is that Betsy?
First of all, yes. As you said, the majority of the funding that's available is already obligated because of federal and state mandates, and so the amount of money that's available for discretionary spending is very small available to the Board of Supervisors. when it comes to the public participating in the budget, Denise knows how many hours I put in 2007 reading the hundreds of pages of budget documents and understanding the projects that were being proposed. It's very daunting for the public to participate in those budget hearings. It's almost a done deal. Each department head presents their budget. There might be a few questions from a given supervisor, but at that point, the budget is already done. It takes months for the administration to assemble that and do that in consultation with the departments over many hours, so that the finalization of that budget doesn't allow for many changes, and the board doesn't make many changes to the budget to say, oh yeah, we want to spend less on that and more on this. So that's kind of a difficult way to suggest that we have the opportunity to participate in that. But the general plan can suggest policies. And let me give you an example. When it comes to law enforcement, there is a program, it's nationally funded, called the Community-Oriented Policing Services. The city of Lakeport has used that extremely well. As you, Maria, know, as a former city council member, the police department has instituted programs and gotten many successful grants for participation in community activities and being present in the areas where there are difficulties. But the sheriff's department is limited in its scope of work according to the state mandates. So the Board of Supervisors needs to have a sense that there are programs that we can apply for and put some energy into that. I don't agree that tourism is going to be the answer to this. We just talked about the degraded quality of the lake and its impact on tourism and its ongoing year after year after year with the increasing climate change and so forth, difficulties in actually managing the lake and the negative publicity. So I don't see, after 20 years of participating in economic development programs, I don't see that tourism itself is going to provide that funding for those essential public needs. I don't see how we can attract new development to an environment in which so many of our communities are plagued by vandalism, drug manufacturing, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, enormous impacts on human beings in these communities that can't even get a patrol officer to answer a call when there's a violent attack on someone. I think this is a much more crucial issue than people are really thinking about. I understand why, but I think it has to be addressed in the economic development, in environmental justice, health and safety, and possibly in those issues that our communities are looking at, because it's hurting everyone that I know. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think where the conversations
I'm sorry.
needs to go on issues like this is, it's just not enough to say we need more money to spend on this or that, because it just doesn't happen. What we need to do is, just like Betsy has outlined, is talk about the county is encouraged to pursue. They can even name some example programs, some ideas for where additional funds can come from. My own experience in the last couple of years our county people, our heads of departments, they all work hard. They're all busy, more than their 40 hours a week. And it is useful sometimes if another group has an idea to come to the department and say, we know about this source, and if we can partner on this source, we might be able to get some funds to do some things like we know you'd like to do, and you don't have the equipment or the people to do it. Mm-hmm. And so $379,000 later, Public Works bought a new masticator. We developed an evacuation plan, and we took down nearly 100 hazardous trees along the Soda Bay corridor. And that came from, again, this collaboration of not just going and knocking on the door and saying, oh, this is bad, you got to do something, but rather working together to find, well, what are the solutions? Here's an idea that you might want to pursue, and we'll help you with it, we'll help write it, and we'll help make it happen. And it happens. That's how. So I think these issues are, no one is going to deny that. That there are times when there's only one sheriff's deputy on duty, at night for the whole county. We know that's a problem. What we've got to do is put our heads together as an advisory committee and come up with some recommendations to the county as a whole about maybe we should look at this or maybe we should look at that. So that we do make progress, because at least new ideas or directions are looked at, rather than just, oh, well, there was not enough money in this year's budget, and then it just, perpetuates the problem.
That is a very good segue into bringing us back to our agenda item. Thank you, Ruby, for getting those copies. If
Maria, I had my hand up for a while. I just want to.
Oh, sure.
Want to wait just a little bit. First of all, I agree 100% with what Betsy said, and I don't know who was speaking. Who was that just recently?
That was Phil.
Phil, I 100% agree with that. And I want to say that the budget process, by the way, is everybody's just working with what's left over, right? It's just what the Board of Supervisors has discretion over. And so 99% of the conversation has to do with that discretionary money, which is very little. However, the process that Phil talked about, and I think this could be reflected in the general plan, the process of citizens, and maybe it's through these local area planning councils initially, but when citizens step up and help the departments find sources of funding, magic happens. That's how we got the Canocti Regional Trails Plan. That's how we've gotten a lot of the funding for the firework that we've done in the county, and the clearing and the controlled burns and those sorts of things. So it's really, I think that mechanism is something we can highlight, and I don't know what we need to do as a General Plan Advisory Committee to encourage more of the citizen-led initiatives in collaboration with county staff, but it certainly has been what has worked to get more money into the county.
So I would just like to point out that at the end of my list, I added a section which I would like to see in the general plan, which is for public services to do exactly what Denise has just talked about. To work with the community organizations, to provide...
It works. It absolutely works. It's one of the things... It
absolutely works. I'm suggesting that the Humboldt County General Plan has an entire section devoted to communicating and working with the public. And please just look at what I suggested in my letter from the previous meeting. There are ways to support community groups, and I'm saying that that's an area that we could include in our general plan policies and then use very fruitfully, as Phil is pointing out. We have this gap with the public itself. Just continuing to ask the volunteers to step up and step up and step up and step up, which they always do, but without much support for the advisory bodies and those groups that want to collaborate. Phil's very sophisticated at this. His organization is very sophisticated, but many of us on the North Shore don't have those kinds of relationships. So please just consider my proposal for a particular orientation of the general plan. Thank you.
Good. So the questions that are before the GPAC today are: 1, considering the initial list of key issues to be addressed in the countywide elements, what's missing? Are there any issues that should be changed? So that is what we discussed last meeting, and it should be noted then, or summarized briefly in pages 2 and 3 of the handout. The second question is, how would you like to see these issues addressed by the general plan? So let's start with page 2, the bullet points that were just the very bare bones synopsis of Betsy's letter. And if we could go through, Betsy, with your help, feel free to jump in. answering questions number 1 and 2. Already got the public services that you mentioned as a new section. That's 1. That's noted as something that is missing from the key issues, and so that is duly noted. What I'd like to recommend is that we change that wording to maybe public and government systems. Only so, public services is the name of a department in our county, and I just would want to avoid any confusion since we're not talking about parks and recreations or building maintenance. We're talking about actual public-private interactions, cooperation, and systems, partnerships, yeah. So if it's okay with you, Betsy, we're going to add that in as something that was missing, but reword it just a little bit to maybe public-private partnerships.
Sure, that's fine.
Awesome.
But I really do recommend it for all of you to take a look at that Humboldt General Plan and see how long over the decades and how well they have developed that community relationship that supports implementation of all the general plan policies.
And Betsy, I think you sent me that email well before I was pushing them through to all the GPAC members. If you would resend that link, the email that had those links, we'll make sure we get it out to everybody.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Thanks.
I just wanted to add to that, if there's a way that when we're talking about government and public and private entities, including tribal governments, we do have 7 distinct sovereign nations within the county that have their own specific governing bodies. It's basically like, you have like board of supervisors times 7 within the county, and so having those relationships and those types of sharing of information, I think, is important when we're talking about funding. Tribes have oftentimes access to federal funding that other entities may not, but not knowing the specific needs, not just within the tribal reservation, but the surrounding communities within neighboring tribal lands, I think could be helpful for tribes to have that dialogue and information shared so that we can collaborate more with programming and when it comes to possibly bringing in resources to the community.
Thanks, Kyle. So maybe changing this then to be public-private tribal partnerships to recognize all the jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. Good? Okay. I see nodding.
Absolutely. And I'll need to point out Humboldt did an excellent job of that as well.
Super. Okay. Starring C. Humboldt. Good. We'll get that passed out to everybody. Okay, let's jump back up to the top of Betsy's list, law enforcement staffing shortfalls. This is a new bullet item that would, in health and safety. The key issues are listed on page 3 of your agenda packet. So this would be adding a new...
That came up in every single community meeting.
Oh yeah, it did. So adding as a new bullet point, law enforcement staffing shortfalls.
Well, I think that's part of the problem. Certainly, that is mostly the problem. But isn't the general plan concept something like, provide adequate safety and security for the citizens of the county through adequate staffing of law enforcement and first responder groups? Wouldn't that be the way?
That would be the number 2 answer, or I think how we would address it in the general plan. So should we just leave that for different areas as a county-wide issue, since it was covered in all of the area workshops? Yeah. Would you like to reword that?
No. I guess I'm confused, maybe like you, about, is a plan a catalog of issues, or is it a plan? Is it a document that says this is what the county needs and is going to work on in the next 20 years or so?
Yes. Andrea, feel free to jump in as soon as in just a moment. What we have right now is sort of our building blocks towards getting to the general plan. So we want to identify what the community sees as the key issues, and then the general plan is going to flesh that out with goals and priorities and things like that on how we're going to address that.
That's a helpful answer. Thank you.
Pleasure. So if there is consensus, Andrea, did you have anything to add for that clarification?
No, I think that was wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you, Mireya.
Great. So going back then, should we add the law enforcement staffing shortfalls as a bullet point under health and safety for emergency preparedness, response, and recovery? Okay. Medical care and healthcare services staffing shortfalls. Same section. I don't see it listed yet. Yep. Yeah.
Maria, are you talking about just the overall including it or the specific wording?
It could be either one. I was talking about inclusion.
Okay, inclusion.
Okay. And Zoom room people, I am counting on you to jump in, members, so that you don't have to raise your hand to respond or show. If you have a disagreement, feel free to voice that. And Andrea, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Sorry about that, Mireya. In response to that last question, I would say that these don't need to be wordsmithed. If we can get the essence of the issue, then that will give us the information that we need to go ahead. And then I also just wanted to take this opportunity to note, just so that we're setting expectations appropriately, that the general plan, while it touches many aspects of the community, it doesn't have control over all things. So identifying these key issues is wonderful. We will then work within the purview of the general plan when we're looking at what it has capacity to do to address these issue areas. And that is likely to be, for many of these, a partial solution rather than being able to comprehensively address it. So I just wanted to note that for folks.
Excellent. Next one, still under emergency preparedness, response, and recovery. Actually, Betsy, I thought this one was might be more of a how we want to see it reflected in the general plan. The dead zones that currently impact notification for our residents and communications. Your suggestion was to consider additional service capacities for evacuation and shelter for special needs populations. So that didn't seem like a new bullet point. That seemed like it was a question number 2 answer. Betsy, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
I'll tell you this. Our natural hazard mitigation plan that was created in 2017 and 2018 discussed everything except communication issues. We have years of experience of power outages, phone outages, social media failures, people not on social media that Phil Hartley talked about this morning in the Fire Safe Council. How many people do not listen to the radio or pay attention to the County Board of Supervisors? We have a massive communication issue in this county for emergency preparedness, for any even for any of the Board of Supervisors decisions, for permitting, for anything. The communication problems that Patrick Wright's talked to the Planning Commission about with the dead zones out there in Scotts Valley where he cannot contact people to tell them to evacuate. There are just hundreds of these, and I referred to them, I encapsulated those in the term said dead zones, but communication itself as an issue, as a subject for general plan solutions is just not included. So I don't know where you'd put that. Health and safety is one of the subjects, but that communication subject is just always scattered around but never really addressed.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
I have to concur with Betsy on this. The communication in this county and getting outreach is definitely a challenge. It always has been, and just something that we need to figure out how to address.
Thanks, Ben. Also, that just makes me realize that some of the Zoom people can't see who's speaking in the room and the other way around. So if we could start just saying your name before you make your comment, I think that'll help everybody stay on the same page. That was Ben from the Water District. Thanks, Ben. So communication is definitely an issue. So far, what we have listed under key issues is lack of redundant communication facilities, which actually Paul Duncan had a suggestion for an amendment that we're going to get to in a minute for changing this one. Betsy also addressed the services capacities for evacuation, which is already in there. But I think Betsy's emphasis, and Betsy, correct me if I'm wrong, is how the special needs population may have different requirements that may not be taken into account. That's a little different than the communication issue that we were just talking about, but I want to make sure that the flavor of her comments are not missed as we're looking through at this list of key issues. Additionally, the lack of resilience centers and community meeting spaces for each local area would also need to take into account the special requirements for our vulnerable populations that will need to be taken care of while these are activated. Anything you want to add on that, Betsy?
Yeah, let me just toss this in. Earlier, when you were talking about how the Board of Supervisors doesn't have a control over everything, I understand that. When it comes to the funding for the fire protection districts, which have a state requirement for pre-planning the evacuation of frail elderly during emergencies, which are ordered by the Sheriff's Department, the Board of Supervisors does have the ability to work with us. We have an Emergency Medical Care Committee. It has the responsibility for the ordinances that govern the level of ambulances that we have. The County Department of Public Health oversees the licensing of ambulances. The number of ambulances and the location of ambulances is a crucial issue for us. It's never discussed at the level of this general plan discussion because it's subsumed under, you know, this relationship with the fire districts. We have to, when we're talking about understaffing, we're not just talking about the lack of nurses and doctors, we're talking about the lack of firefighter, EMTs, and ambulance drivers and ambulances themselves and the licensing. And then that again goes right back to the Board of Supervisors, how much they're willing to invest in a relationship, a public-private partnership to get those services improved. That's an investment of their time, just like it is in the tourism district focus. So it's, gosh, I don't even know where I've gone now with this. But just so you understand, the Board of Supervisors does have a direct relationship with how we address these policy gaps.
Excellent. Thank you. We're going to move on to the next bullet point, extreme temperatures. That's the next section under health and safety. And I think this is an additional bullet point, which is considering additional ways to address extreme heat issues other than cooling centers. Margot?
Should we also expand that thought to warming centers in the winter?
Mm-hmm. Betsy, this is one of yours. Would you like to amend the addition? We have a bullet point that says lack of cooling centers in local areas. Should we also add something in for extreme weather?
I think all of this falls under the heading of Community Resilience Center operations.
Okay.
Community Resilience Center, which is something that Terry Logson has been working on with the support of the Strategic Growth Council, where each community would have a location that could serve the public, whether it's for a shelter in place, whether it's for evacuation, whether it's for heat or cooling, or let's say there's a massive power outage, which we've had, and then people need medical attention, they can go to that Community Resilience Center. I think I would lump everything under that focus on the community development of those combined services. And sure, warming centers, the whole deal.
Okay, so how about if we change that bullet point then to be lack of community resilience centers during community emergencies? Does that better capture it?
What? Sorry.
Changing the lack of cooling centers in local areas to lack of community resilience centers for community emergencies.
Sure, that's, yeah. That's what everybody seems to be focusing on, is providing all of those services in each community.
Right. Sharon, did you have something?
Excuse me, isn't that just above in the last bullet under health and safety? Health and safety, lack of resilient centers and community meeting spaces,
Oh.
each local area, that we could just expand on that?
It actually is. I wonder if we even need extreme temperatures then, because we need to be looking at all types of emergencies. Betsy, you good with
Well,
taking
if
out
you're
the
gonna-
extreme temperature section altogether since it's captured in that bullet point above? Lack
Fine,
of,
but keep in mind that with the extreme heat, that's tied to the presence of cyanobacteria, which the state is also studying here, and looking at regulating the shoreline self-served water systems, which have no regulations. The Public Health Department is focusing on this aspect as well. So it's not just under emergencies, it's under health and safety protections for the entire public.
I think we get to that later in climate change adaptation, but duly noted. Okay,
Hey, I mean, you can mix it up any way you want to.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
fine.
I'm just trying to get us through the next couple pages in an hour. Or
Boy, me too.
In about the next 35 minutes. Excellent. Okay. Aging and disabled unable to maintain housing or parcel conditions for prevention of wildfire. So this would be in the next section then, wildfire. What this could be is a new item. It said we do have hardened homes with defensible space as a key issue. Oh, there it is. It's actually already in there, Betsy. Low-income and elderly homeowners' inability to comply with home hardening and defensible space requirements. Good. So we've got that captured. We're going to go to the next one. Government programs need funding to implement preventive projects. I think we already discussed that one. Let's keep going. Watershed management priorities. And jump in, Betsy, if I'm skipping stuff that's really important that we need captured. Watershed management priorities. Betsy, can you actually speak to this one? Because I think that this is going into now water resources.
Well, it's not just water resources. It hits on everything. This morning in the Risk Reduction Authority meeting, we talked about biomass, vegetation, and how there's a statewide program for that. We have probably a half a dozen major programs that are attending to wildfire prevention, but we have an actual Clear Lake integrated watershed management plan. We have creeks that have been just damaged. We have watersheds that have erosion control problems. We have water quality issues that are affecting the lake and its tourism abilities. Watershed management priorities are in the background. People don't understand what the Watershed Protection District is or its responsibilities for the US EPA water quality programs. Earlier when we talked about, or in the previous meeting, for example, when we talked about including the mountains, we talked about the statement was that the lake is the most important asset of the county. I claim that the county provides freshwater supplies to 6 other counties, and that is depending on our forests. We have over half of our land is federal lands. Those are in our watersheds that actually affect everything. They affect the shoreline and they affect the lake itself. So, I think we need to prioritize watershed management itself.
So we do have a bullet point under climate change adaptation. I know Sharon's going to raise her hand at this. It says resilient watershed management. So we need to make sure we have a definition of what resilient is. But good, we've got that included. Thank you, Betsy, for that context. Then last one that we haven't covered yet, a new bullet point for surface water management. We do have groundwater management under water resources, so this would add a new bullet point for surface water management.
Did I put that in there?
Sure did. Pretty sure.
It probably goes to the item I spoke about at the earlier meetings. We have half a dozen very, very outdated and very ineffective municipal code chapters including shoreline protection, stormwater management, floodplain management, grading ordinance, and these are all enforceable, or they should be enforceable programs that are extremely ineffective now. Those are part of implementing watershed management priorities to meet the water quality orders from the US EPA. When you ask about what's being done to take care of the lake, to address the presence of toxic materials and so forth, it all goes back to this. The surface water management, we have the new rules for protecting the hitch that, well, we want to have water well reporting for agricultural purposes. There's a lot of contention over well reporting, and I'm sure the agricultural members of the committee understand this. So what affects our surface waters, and how are we addressing those? I claim there's lots of these previous plans. The plans are made, they sit there on the shelf, and they aren't actually implemented.
Thank you. All right, we're doing good. That brings me to the end of the bullet points of my summaries of your email, Betsy. So feel free to let us know if there's any other items that we may have missed. But we're going to move on next to, let's see, Margot's comment was to add a section for cumulative effects under water issues. Cumulative effects under water issues, to add cumulative effects for water demand in discretionary permits. I remember that was from last time. So that's sort of how we're going to address it. That second part about discretionary permits is like a number 2, how we would address that in the general plan. But the first part was to add a section, or this would be a bullet point then, under cumulative effects. It's kind of a subsection of groundwater water supply, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So, and cumulative effects, unless there are any objections. Effects of water use.
Maria, no objection here. I just want to point out, though, that the local area planning process, the main flaw that I'm concerned about with the process is that we might miss cumulative effects. Because each area is just looking at just their area. So it would be important that the General Plan Advisory Committee or the whole general plan actually take a look at the cumulative effects of any individual, not just water activity, but other. And I'm thinking, for example, development of chain stores. When the Dollar General invasion began and started coming in here, it was really clear that they had more than one store in mind. And so those cumulative effects, it's important that we don't look at these things at just on a just one-off basis.
Thank you. That brings up an opportunity for me to remind the public that this time what we're doing is we're doing the general plan update and the area plans all at the same time, so they're be synthesized, as well as the environmental analysis for the Lake County 2050 project is going to take into account both the local area plans and the general plan. And so going forward, it'll be more clear, hopefully, to the public as well as to the planning division for future planners that the local area plans and the general plan carry equal weight. So, but you bring up actually another point, which is cumulative effects countywide of a certain impact, like a type of store, and that's harder to capture. But right now we're working on groundwater. So, but thank you. That is totally an important point. Andrea, you have your hand up. Jump in, please.
If I understood Denise's comment correctly, I think there was a thought that the water resources was a chapter in the local area plans, but it is actually in the countywide elements. I don't know if folks are able to see the screen share now, but I did pull up the graphic that shows the organization of the general plan elements, those that are going to be covered countywide and those that are under the local area plans.
Right, and I was thinking the example I used was more economic development, but yes, thank you.
Oh, understood.
Yeah.
So can I just ask a question here? Cumulative effects of large and continual water demand, what's going to be the benchmark? What's going to be the gauge? How's that going to be? What's the data that's going to determine?
At this point, that is undetermined. The question before the committee is just if we would consider that a key issue. All the priorities and goals and objectives, that's going to get fleshed out as we go through the process, which will continue to be under GPAC review.
Okay.
Okay, so unless I hear any objections, we'll add that onto our bullet point list. Secondly, under agricultural economy, adding livable wage, and there was some discussion about a livable wage, and Sharon pointed out that a lot of our farmers would really love to have a livable wage every year. So under agricultural economy, which is the last section of our bullet points, if we wanted to add a living, do you mean like a living wage, or is that too specific of a definition? You mean like a livable wage?
Well, so I would love for Lake County to continue its heritage of agriculture. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we know there's so many challenges, and a lot of people can't make a living in agriculture. And I would like to see us to brainstorm, like Phil has suggested, and how can we make it so a family can make a go of the family farm? And how can we be good food producers in this county to address, the food insecurity in Lake County? It's a shame.
So something like achieving a livable wage?
Yeah, so I don't have the answers, but I would like us to try to come up with a model and a way to test that model so people can choose, I want to work with the land, I want to feed people, and I want to be able to make a living doing this.
Well, I think the troublesome word may be wage, because what you're really talking about is people having economic resiliency, to survive. I mean, if I grow half my food, that's not a wage, but yeah. I can live, small farms live off the fact that they provide a lot of their own resources and they don't get any money for them.
Well, I think what we're talking about is the commercial economy, so commercial agriculture, but yeah.
Okay, well, but it talks about small farmers and so, anyway. And I guess I have some objection if somebody says, I've decided I want a particular lifestyle. I want to live here in the country and I want to grow some exotic spices that are interesting and whatnot. And I want somebody to guarantee that I'm going to make it. I don't know.
I don't think we're going to add that to our bullet points, but go ahead, Sharon.
You got to be careful of the wording,
Yeah.
If you want to make a comment about that, you might say support an economic unit or a sustainable economic base or something along those lines, because his point, wage is not really what we're talking about, but you can't live on 5 acres of pears or walnuts or that kind of thing. You can't sustain yourself year after year. So what we're talking about is a sustainable economic unit or something like that, rather than certainly than wage, or maybe we don't address that at all. I don't know.
I had a question to clarify that.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Kyle?
So when we're speaking about these, we're talking about small agriculture and hearing comments, are we talking about trying to envision a better lifestyle for those farmers, or are we talking about a collective vision for, not just a farming family having a better off, being able to live better, but also how does that, their progression in being successful benefit the broader community as a whole? I think that's the other framing of it is, are we talking about bettering the self and the family, or are we talking about bettering the county collectively?
I had the same comment, so thank you for that, Calville. I I feel like when I read this comment when it was made, that it made a lot of sense that it was about exploring options. I think there's a lack of data. Now, there are some models out there that communities can look to and try to implement in their own community to determine what is possible. But I think that the comment that originally was made was about exploring economic models for the greater good, right? So that we could grow food here and that we could do it in an economical way. And it, you know, as things happen in the world, like supply chain issues, that we know we're taken care of. And so I think there's a broader good to it, but also there's not a lot of incentive for a farmer to lose money year after year. Believe me, I know, on walnuts year after year after year. So I do think some economic modeling and some testing is a great idea, and I think that's what was suggested. It wasn't saying, it wasn't prescribing an answer. It was suggesting some sort of modeling or testing.
And I support that too. The idea that what you're looking for is something that's part and parcel of the overall counties and the people who live in that counties, sustainability, food security, and other things like that. I mean, the nation has or dairy farmers, for instance, across the United States operate operations that if they existed on their own, they'd be out of business tomorrow. But the government steps in and subsidizes them for raising cows and making milk so that the price of milk at Safeway doesn't escalate beyond the reach of the average family. So it's a complex issue, but I think the previous gentleman talked, hit the nail on the head. It's really not about protecting the individual farmer. It's about protecting an economy within a county and creating a possibility for mutual beneficiary relationship.
Right. I'm sorry. May I jump in? Phil completes the rest of my thought in that I'm not thinking not just of the small family farmer, but everybody who's involved in the enterprise, even the farmhand. If we want to make agriculture a vibrant part of our community, everybody has to benefit, and I would like to see us do everything we can to make that so.
So these could be two different bullet points. One, finding ways to support a family through agriculture, or in agriculture, and then two, supporting agriculture through the local economy.
Well,
right?
And agriculture supports the local economy.
Yeah.
You buy a tractor, you need repair, you need gas, you buy fertilizer of some sort, you know, all those kinds of things to make the farm run is a community effort, because you need all those goods and services to do that. So a farmer is dependent on the community, supports the community, and supports many businesses within the community in order to farm their walnuts or grapes or pears.
And that goes back to my original comment, which is a living wage isn't the issue.
Right. Yeah.
See, it's this mutual economic sustainability, both for the farmer and for the community. So.
I love that wording. I think that's perfect.
Yeah,
Could you say
sustainable
that one more
economic
time?
unit.
Say that one more time. I wasn't writing.
Mutual economic
Benefit.
sustainability.
He used the S word, sustainability, but something that is that we can sustain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, so just a minute, because let's remember, okay, wait. Make sure I capture it in a way that actually means something after we leave this room. So we would add a bullet point then that says one of the key issues is mutual economic sustainability. I think I need a few more subjects.
For local agricultural. And I'm thinking food, but it could be any agriculture enterprise, I suppose. But I'm thinking specifically for the public benefit.
Okay. So add a bullet point that says mutual economic sustainability for local agriculture. I got to define mutual, because somebody's going to read that and think mutual between what?
Well, no, it's the mutual is between the I don't know if you want to use the farmer or agriculturist or say, and the people of the community.
And those who support the farmer.
Yeah, the farmer
And the farmer, it's a circle.
Yep.
It's not the community that supports the farmer solely, it's a mutually supportive
circle.
structure.
So
We're back
mutual.
to circular economy, Nuria.
Okay, Denise. I'm
I'd
trying
like
to get
to-
a bullet
I'd like
point out of this.
Please.
Mutual economic sustainability for local agriculture and community. We get it? Is that Denise?
The community.
Betsy, jump on in. Don't bother raising your hand.
Thank you very much. I disagree with the whole diversion of this discussion away from a living wage. One of the reasons we have problems with staffing, which the Department of Social Services explained last year in great detail, is that we do not have competitive wages for the line staffing. Farm workers need to have, every single worker that is involved in the economy here has to have enough money coming in to sustain their ability to pay their rent, to have health care insurance, to buy food, to support their kids going to school. We don't have that. Now, that's way beyond agriculture. I don't know if I'm venturing too far away from the agricultural subject, but the fact is that living wages are really crucial. And we see this in every aspect of public service, even in county employees who can't afford the county health insurance program, and 30% of the county is depending upon Medi-Cal, for example. So wages and compensation, starting with the county employees, the Vision 2028, one of the aspirations is to support the workforce. I think we have to get down to the basis of what that really is about, and that's enough pay, enough compensation.
So the only thing I'll add to that is just I agree with all of that, but then we need work that can pay those wages. So we have to have our workforce has to be more developed. So if we're going to pay for a farmer, if they're going to pay a living wage, then they won't have a farm. So we have to figure out how to have both. They have to be able to increase their sales, their productivity, their revenue, to be able to pay what is appropriate. So it's, and all of which is possible in a good conversation, but it's the tough part is, I don't think anybody wants to say, no, I can pay him whatever, right? Like everybody wants to be able to pay more. It is what's sustainable for the business. And if the business can support that wage in Lake County, we do not have the population and the wages to be able to support that stuff. So unfortunately, it is like it's a which comes first, chicken or the egg. So I think it's a valuable conversation in terms of, is there investment, I mean, and potentially a good conversation for this, right? Like, is there investment that can be made to develop a workforce that for healthcare and all of that pays a lot of money to, and then those people put that money back into the economy through goods and services and local produce and yada, yada, yada. Does that make sense?
Okay,
Maria,
Danny,
I
we'll
would
get to you in just a moment. Yeah, go ahead, Sharon. And then we have Betsy and Denise, you have your hands raised in the Zoom, so I'm not.
I would just suggest that we do not venture into the living wage conversation beyond the sentence that you already put.
Making a living in agriculture? Would that be a key issue?
Well,
Or do we want to stick to mutual economic sustainability?
I think leave it at that, because the point is that the conversation about living wage is across the board in so many other areas that to put it there, I don't think, then we'd have to put it in all the other places, every other place. So I think leaving it where you have landed with that allows for enough flexibility for that conversation.
Okay, Margot, just a second. Denise has had her hand up. Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that this isn't about coming up with a policy for living wage or anything like that. This comment was made that we need to explore models, because the models that exist clearly aren't working. Workers aren't making a living wage and farmers are going broke. And so there's not enough money in the system, which means there need to be some model. So there needs to be some exploration of models on how we can improve this. And I don't know what those are. I mean, sometimes community supported agriculture has managed to pull it off. And then it was, some of the activities were brought in front of the labor board because they were paying workers in groceries, right? So there are possibilities of models. I don't know how that looks, but I think that the comment that was made wasn't about coming up with a policy. It was about exploring models so that this could be possible in the future. Okay. Right now, it's not. You can't get there from here right now.
And what we're focusing on today also is just establishing if these are key issues that we're missing from the list that we already had.
Yeah, and I think the issue, if we focus on the issue, it's that we don't have economic sustainability in farming right now, neither from the side of the farmer or from the worker. And there need to be some exploration of models on how we might do that.
Okay, if we have a moment for public input, we have Danny waiting. And then we'll jump back in.
I just wanted to maybe offer some language that might be helpful to kind of pull all this together. The first thing that popped into my head when you were talking about workers and obviously people buying that was financially solvent. And that kind of encapsulates all of, I think, what you're trying to get at. So the first thing that popped into my head was financially solvent and resilient local food systems. And that also kind of encapsulates that last bullet point in the range of agriculture as well. I'd be happy to say that again. Financially solvent and resilient local food systems. I don't know if that's, I hope that's helpful. But.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with the general plan making a value commitment to a living wage for all in the county.
I think like in the economic development, that Lake County, we want to develop our workforce to, for them to have a living wage, not necessarily ag specific, but that as a general economic development in, on the back end of that looks like, supporting our schools and our trades, trade schools and community colleges and yada, yada, yada. So there are things that from planning we can do on the back end, but to be able to go, we want to, increase the level of our population to be able to make a living wage and,
Provide pathways.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. 9 minutes left. Just checking in. So we have mutual economic sustainability for local agriculture and community that seems to have consensus on addition as a new bullet point. And then taking out mine, it's too slangy anyway. What Danny suggested was financially solvent and resilient local food systems, which kind of touches on but expands what was above local food and food processing in range of agricultural operations. So what's the feeling of the committee regarding adding that bullet point before we jump into the last 4 or 5 things that we need to discuss? Thumbs up? We good? Good. Bill? Financially solvent and resilient local food systems, adding it as a key issue.
Sorry, I missed you.
Got thumbs up in the room. Okay, so one, we all like mutual economic sustainability for local agriculture and community.
Yeah.
This latest suggestion is financially solvent and resilient local food systems, which talks more about community and ag.
You're suggesting smoosh them together?
Smoosh those together.
even though we're using the R word, which. Yeah, okay, I've got thumbs up in Zoom. Anybody against adding this one as a key issue? We're going to keep going. Next, good. Okay, we're on the last page. Denise added cumulative impacts of water use. Oh yeah, we actually already covered that. Good. Kyle talked about including tribal cultural resources and their protection. This would be a new section. This is not limited to ag. So we have agricultural resources, water resources. This would be adding a new section for tribal cultural resources. Good.
I had a question to clarify that. If perhaps it be, I did some research. If we can incorporate more instead of just like ag-related or land, but a tribal coordination element to kind of encompass some of the areas where there is overlap, not just within the natural resources or cultural resources, but also when it comes to consultation with tribal governments. If I have some examples that I could forward, but I would like to propose that as a result of my research a little bit after our last discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. If you wouldn't mind sending that, we'll make sure everybody gets it.
Thank you, will do.
Great.
Okay, so Maria, this is a new blue heading, tribal
This
resources.
would be a new blue heading, tribal cultural resources, specifically the protection of tribal cultural resources during development and during emergencies and recovery. And then we'll see what Kyle's going to send us also for future consideration. Next, this was Paul Duncan's recommendation under health and safety. If you flip back to page 3, there was that bullet point that talked about lack of redundant communication facilities. What he'd like to see is that changed.
Double whopper day, nigga. Double whopper. Double whopper, nigga. Do that shit. Hey.
Yeah, okay, thanks. As I was saying, he'd like to see that change to address the hardening of our infrastructure for communication facilities. And then that would, so we would change out that bullet point to, instead of lack of redundant, we would put hardening of communication facilities infrastructure. And then the number 2, how we'd like to see that addressed, he went on further to say that that would include a 500-foot defensible space clearance, as well as increasing our current 3-day power backup to a 7-day power backup. And then another one he added was in site development permits require undergrounding of power lines to the site. So this would be an addition of changing out that bullet point is the only thing we have. Everybody good with that? Next one. Mark Lips brought in talking about tourism and how it is integrated into our local economy. And should there be a marketing umbrella to align these groups to keep us all moving in the same direction? I didn't really have time to change that into a bullet point, but if the committee is amenable, we will figure out a bullet point and where it goes regarding creating or establishing a marketing umbrella, or it's more of like an agency umbrella to coordinate all of our local marketing groups and see if we can sort of be more than 1 + 1. Make sure we're all going kind of in the same direction and how we can play off of each other for extra benefits. That's what I got from his statement.
Is that like Visit Lake County, or there would be another, there would be a larger umbrella over that?
Not sure how it would end up looking, but some form of multi-agency or NGO coordination to make sure that we're all maximizing and not duplicating and wasting our efforts.
Doesn't the county have a tourist?
We have a tourism improvement district.
That could not, could that serve as that?
Quite possibly.
Yeah, I think the TID, I think they're the Visit Lake County. So they're the ones that manage that.
And I'm not going to pretend if I know that's all they're limited to because I'm not involved in that section. But it's worth investigating.
But that sounds like a solution, like a plan.
Mm-hmm.
What's the issue?
Right.
Remember now, you
Yeah, how are we going to word it?
You schooled me
You're giving it
that
back
we're
to
talking
me, yeah.
about
So the bullet
issues.
point then would be coordinating marketing groups in the county for maximum benefit.
Okay.
That's my first stab at it. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Margo?
I'd start
Yeah.
with maximizing, yeah.
Maximizing.
Maximizing.
Maximizing
Issue is
economic
just a game.
development efforts through coordination.
Right, yes.
Something like that.
Okay,
We'll work on it.
sounds like more like
Okay,
a plan.
good. But I see overall improvement. It looks like we're getting hijacked right now. So our last one is putting flood recovery into one of these areas as a bullet point. Are we amenable to that?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah,
Then,
I'm opposed to floods.
since we don't all want to sit around and watch porn, let's see what we're doing next.
Can I just ask 2 questions from last time?
One moment, Sharon.
Sorry.
I want to just make sure that people in the Zoom room can actually hear us, because that's something that happens when we get hijacked. Yeah. Okay, so for those in the Zoom room, we're done with all of our action items. We're going to go ahead and discontinue. Thank you so much for attending, and we are going to keep you informed through emails of our next meeting. Thanks, bye.
A question on...
Recording stopped.
The committee flow chart. Who's who, what's what on the...
That we talked about in Kelseyville? Or did we talk about it here too?
We talked about it here too.
Okay, so I just received the revised project timeline, and I think that it may be helpful for understanding because it has, I'm going to email it to you as soon as we're done with this meeting. It has lines that talk about the general plan update and like the calendar where the GPACs are meeting and all along that timeline. We added in the LAPACs under the line that's for local area plans. And so I didn't want to talk about the differences between, we couldn't introduce the MACs, the municipal advisory councils in there because they don't really have any involvement other than their normal advisory capacity for the Board of Supervisors on land use. So that's for the first step in my talking about the different committees.
Okay, and then the other question is, you had mentioned maybe an ag subcommittee to look at the interrelation of so many of these things. Was it subcommittee or?
It was a stakeholder meeting. That's still in the works.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so we are going to go ahead and adjourn our meeting, and our next meeting, we will be much more conservative with who gets access, so that we don't get hijacked so easily. Thanks, everybody, for hanging in there.
I have one quick question. Are we, like, there's under, I think, Betsy's email, the, like, public services, did we do that? Under her?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It as a new section.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah, good. So I think that where we're going from this point now is we have our second series of local area plan community workshops set for next month. And we're doing it differently than we did the first. So we'll have 1 week in August where we're doing 2 in-person meetings. The first meeting is going to be at the board, and I'm still not sure where that second meeting is. I'm going to have to figure it out because we got to get that flyer out really soon. And then the next week we'll have 2 virtual-only meetings. So we'll get that flyer out to you as soon as it's ready. And then then the staff will start really cranking in on drafts of different elements and local area plans, which will all come to you for review with much more notice than you usually get with these items, because those are when we're really going to start diving into some documents. Margo.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So in the rush to wrap up the meeting because of the hijacking, I didn't get to add a suggestion about economic development. And that would be to piggyback on your idea about living wage for all. I think that'd be great if we could have economic development, really take a look at tourism and have jobs that local residents can, and maybe it'll attract the young people to want to stay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I had suggested that a whole section on economic development.
Workforce development and creating high-paying jobs and
All those things underneath it.
I mean, so the problem would be, right, lack of high-paying jobs.
Yeah.
So in our, in the hospitals and all of that, like, we lack services because because our medical facilities lack
Right.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so that's the issue. So then focusing on workforce development, healthcare, all of that to create high-paying jobs.
Well, and to look at, I know we're kind of off some, but at the communications thing, for instance, is how I vision the future for small rural counties if they want to survive. Of course, they have agriculture, but there's this growing number of people who discovered during the pandemic, with the help of their high-paying corporations, that they really didn't need to go into the office every day.
Yep.
And they didn't need to live in a stacked-up suburbia or a noisy, polluted city. But in fact, they could live out in a nice house, out in a...
Turn your mic on. Oh.
Oh, I was just making comments off the cuff. But the future worker could live in a nice, naturally beautiful community and pay $300,000, $400,000 for a house instead of $1.5 million, and comfortably complete their job to the satisfaction of their corporation if, and only if, they have reliable broadband communication.
Right.
And so that issue becomes not just for emergencies and for us to get information to people. It becomes an economic force.
So a new section for economic development with bullet points of workforce development, lack of high-paying jobs, and broadband access.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And then sorry, I had another thought. Like for the values, I haven't seen the 2028 vision. I don't know if there's inclusion in there in terms of, we want to be inclusive of
DEI, diversity,
right, and, our sovereign nations, our tribes, and that, we're,
Yes.
inclusive community, something, I don't know. But
I don't remember seeing that in 2028, but
We value
Yeah. Right.
diversity, inclusion, and equity.
yeah.
Okay.
And really, like, again, I think about it as a lens and that, that partnership with, with the tribes, all of that, the stronger that partnership is, the stronger our community is.
Good. Got it. Everybody? To 5, yes. We only went 5 minutes over.
That's impressive.
We're cool.
Yeah, that hijacking kind of spent us.
So this is how I got young teachers to stay, that, couldn't find anybody, had no place to go, come out to Harborwood, so there was nothing. So my husband was a coach at the high school, and he